Chiefs Kingdom, what's happening? This is Gary McKenzie back at you again for another episode of Gridiron Lines. This is RGR Football. Today, we're going to talk about the Chiefs defense, kind of like we always do. Then I have a question for all of you. The Chiefs have lost to the Bengals 3 times in a row. Will they ever beat those pesky Bengals from Cincinnati? My answer to that is coming up, but just for a little hint, yes, they can. So, we're going to start our episode the same way we always do, fan shout out time. And today's fan shout out goes to Robert Roth. And Robert says, I love the video. Something seems to be wrong with your connection. Just skips a bit from time to time, giving you a heads up. So, Robert, I want to say thank you for not being like my first ex girlfriend. So, a long time ago, I went out to dinner with a group of friends and we're eating, we're all having a good time. And someone from across the table says, Hey, Gary, you got something on your face. And I look over at my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, "How long has this been here? How long have I had all this stuff all over my face?" And she says, "For a while." I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" So I want to thank you, Robert, for not being like that old girlfriend of mine and telling me when something, was off. Be that person. Be like Robert Roth. So I've been having trouble with my internet connection. I live in the middle of nowhere. And if I stream this content, later in the night, which is usually the best time for me to do it, there's a lot of bandwidth problems. So I'm slowly and surely trying to sort out all the connection problems. Hopefully, this video is of higher quality, but we'll get there eventually. So I want to say thank you, Robert, and make sure that you comment on this video as well, and like and subscribe and do all that good stuff. I really appreciate it, and perhaps next week you'll be in the fan shout out. So going forward, let's look at the rolling average for the Chiefs' defensive points per game allowed. So last week versus the Bengals, they took a step backwards. They allowed 27 points, and their points per game, average points per game, went from 22.1 to 22.5. Before the game started, the Bengals were averaging 25.9 points per game, and they were able to put up 27 against the Chiefs. I wanted the Chiefs to hold them to 26 or less. They got close, but couldn't quite do it. Still, if you look at their high point in week 5, where they're allowing 25 points per game, they have continued to lower that total. They did hit a bump in the road, week 12 versus the Bengals, but this is the real juicy part of their schedule, especially for their defense over these next few weeks. You got the Broncos twice. You have the Texans. Few teams that have really hard time scoring the ball. So you want to see this points per game average drop. The closer they can get it to 20, the better chance the Chiefs have to beat a team like the Bengals in the playoffs. A better chance the Chiefs have to go all the way. So you want to see it continue to drop. You want to see the defense continue to lower that points per game average. Right now they're at 22.5, which is not very good, but you've got 5 more games left to get it right, to continue to drop it. So let's see how far they can get with it. So the question I'm sure most of you are, asking yourselves, or you're maybe have a little bit of lack of confidence in the Chiefs right now. But how do the Chiefs beat the Bengals? They've lost 3 in a row in the past 2 seasons versus Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And I don't think this is a can they beat the Bengals? Yes, of course they can. But how? How do they beat them? What happened in their 3 games versus the Bengals that gave them uh, gave them the loss? So before we get into kind of that deeper conversation, I just want to talk about how unique it is for Coach Andy Reid to lose to the same opponent 3 times in a row. So over the hundreds of games that Coach Reid has coached in, he's only lost to a team 3 times in a row 12 times throughout his whole career. And some of you may ask yourself, okay, well, after that 3rd loss, what did he do in the next game? Did he turn around? But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They actually did worse than an average Reid game. And in the 4th game, Andy Reid is 5-7 versus those teams that beat him 3 times in a row. So that says that if they face the Bengals a 4th time in the playoffs, then games similar to that, for Coach Reid, he's 5-7 in those. However, I wanna say take that with a grain of salt because each one of these games is unique in its own right, and the Bengals game, if the Chiefs are to meet them in the playoffs, will be its own game. So, I think it's an interesting stat, but I don't think that it will give the Chiefs any worse opportunity or worse chance to beat the Bengals if they saw them again, either in the playoffs or next year. Another thing is that this is Mahomes' first time losing 3 consecutive matchups versus any opponent. So Mahomes has never lost 3 times in a row to any opponent. And if the Chiefs see the Bengals in the playoffs, you have to kinda just think to yourself, it's gonna be so hard for any team, even a team like the Bengals, to knock out Mahomes 4 games in a row. I don't think the Bengals have any secret formula for beating the Chiefs. I think that they do a few things very well, and the Chiefs have not executed very well against it. And so let's look back at those 3 games that the Chiefs have lost to the Bengals. I hate to, pour salt on an open wound, but what happened in those games? So in the first game in week 17 of last year, the Chiefs disappeared in the second half. They were outscored 17-3 in the second half. The Bengals continuously went and dropped back in 8-man drops. They're playing coverage defenses. Mahomes did not hit his check down receiver in that game with much frequency. He was scanning down the field. He felt like he had all the time in the world in the pocket, and he could get rid of the ball to one of his players downfield eventually. So that was the thought process he was going through. Unfortunately, that didn't work. And also in that game, that first game, the Chiefs were penalized 10 times for 83 yards. And if you remember, the penalties had a huge impact in that game. So 2 trends happened in that game. Actually, there were 3, sorry. The third is that Burrow just flat out played better than Mahomes. He outperformed Mahomes. In that first game, Burrow had almost 450 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. Mahomes had 260 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. So Burrow outplayed Mahomes as well. So there's the 3 things that went wrong in that game. The second game, once again, 8-man drops. The Chiefs only scored 3 points in the second after the second half. They're outscored 17-3 after the second half. So this is the AFC Championship game last year. Burrow did not outperform Mahomes in this game, with Mahomes having 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions with a 91 rating, and then Burrow had 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception for an 86.5 rating. But the Chiefs lost the turnover battle. They, had turned the ball over twice, while the Bengals turned the ball over once. If you remember, it was Patrick Mahomes' interception in overtime that really cost the Chiefs in that game. There weren't a whole lot of penalties in that game, though. So, once again, the Bengals dropped 8. Mahomes didn't hit his check down. Thought he had all the time in the world to scan the secondary and try to squeeze the ball in somewhere, which he has the arm to do it. But mentally, that's not where he needs to be when he's seeing that look. And then lastly, in the game in week 13 last week in 2022, once again, the Bengals dropped 8 into coverage. When the Chiefs needed to pass the ball, Mahomes didn't hit his check down, and it was there throughout the game. Joe Burrow outperformed Mahomes again, throwing for 286 yards and 2 touchdowns and a 126.6 rating. And then Mahomes only threw for 223 yards with 1 touchdown and a 98.2 rating. And then Mahomes took more sacks than Burrow. So that's another common theme. In each one of these 3 games, the sack total has not quite been what you would think it would be from everything you hear regarding the Bengals pass protection, except for the first game in week 17. So week 17, the Chiefs did get after Burrow in that game. with 4 sacks, and Mahomes had 0 sacks. But after that, in the AFC Championship game, Burrow only had 1 sack while Mahomes had 4. And then last week versus the Bengals, Burrow was sacked once, Mahomes was sacked twice. So as good as everyone says the Chiefs' pass protection is, and as bad as everyone says the Bengals' pass protection is, the Chiefs were not able to sack Joe Burrow in their last 2 matchups. But on the flip side, the Bengals got after Mahomes pretty well. So what gives? And there's just something going on between these 2 teams where the pass protection when the Bengals face the Chiefs, they just play like all-world pass protectors. And so if the Chiefs are to face the Bengals again, I mean, just going over this handful of information here, there's a ton of areas where they can improve to beat the Bengals. The first thing I wanna say is that the Chiefs' defense has got to slow Joe Burrow down. It's hard to win in the NFL whenever you're giving up a better passer rating than your team is generating. So passer rating is one of the best indicators for winning a football game. The team with the quarterback who has the better passer rating wins more frequently than the team who does not. And the Chiefs defense has to step up and stop Joe Burrow because each time they've lost, Joe Burrow has put up pretty good numbers, and at some critical juncture in the game, they have not been able to stop the Bengals when they needed to. The next is they have to win the sack battle. The Chiefs cannot be going and playing Cincinnati and coming in there with the 4th best sack total in the NFL and then disappearing throughout the game versus a pass protection unit with the Bengals that is not touted very highly. You can't just go and disappear. The Chiefs went through a stretch where they were playing, top 5 pass protection offenses, and they got multiple sack games, 5 sacks here, 5 sacks there, 3 sacks there. Then they go and they face the Bengals, and you don't even hear about Burrow being under any duress. That has got to change. Another thing is they can't lose the turnover battle. So in 2 of these 3 games versus the Bengals, they lost the turnover battle. They shot themselves in the foot. You can't be doing that if you want to beat a good team like the Bengals. And lastly, they can't beat themselves. No dumb penalties. You can't have costly penalties that overturn an interception, like what happened last week. So there's a ton of things the Chiefs can do to really give themselves a good shot to beat the Bengals. They've really beaten themselves badly in these 3 games. So I think that the sky is not falling. If the Chiefs face the Bengals again in the playoffs, if they take care of these 4 things, they will win the football game. But we'll see if they get there in the playoffs. We'll see if they end up matching up against the Bengals again. So before I go forward into Coach Reid's grade versus the Bengals, I want to ask you, what do you think has been kind of the toxic elixir that the Bengals have mixed up versus the Chiefs? What is it that the Bengals have done, or what is it that the Chiefs have done or not done that's causing them to have so many problems in these games? And how confident are you in the Chiefs if they go and face the Bengals again? For myself, I think if they see him again this year, I'm going to be feeling pretty good because a lot of these problems after going through and looking over the games, they're very addressable. It's not like the Bengals are just outright beating the Chiefs in a boxing match. No, it's a little more sophisticated that it's things the Chiefs can fix. So let us know in the comments. What do you think has been the main problem? So as far as Reed's grade versus the Bengals, this was a game versus a conference opponent versus a very good team who's playing super hot right now. They're going on the road into a hostile environment versus a team they've had trouble with. And all in all, given all those circumstances, I think the Chiefs played a good football game. The Bengals are not, they're no slouch. They're a good football team. In fact, they kind of remind me of the AFC North version of the Chiefs a little bit. Really good quarterback, defense that's just scrappy enough to kind of hang in there and fight. Well coached team. So the Chiefs were, in a bind in this game. They really needed the win to maintain the number one seed in the AFC, but unfortunately they lost. The Chiefs went into the game and they didn't have a whole lot of penalties. The team seemed mostly prepared to play. The defense played fairly well, other than their issues getting after Burrow and then failing to make a big stop at the end of the game. But you got to give some credit to Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense because that last slant that they caught was it was a perfectly placed ball, and there's not much you can do about that. So overall, I thought the Chiefs team came prepared to play. The defense could use some work. Spagnuolo really should be the one who has a lot of the heat on him for this Bengals game, not Coach Reid. And if they do play him again, it should be Spagnuolo who uh, it'll be Spagnuolo who really puts the Chiefs over the top if they do beat the Bengals. Because that's what they need. They need a good performance from their defense to beat this team. In terms of play calling, the Chiefs did a pretty good job moving the ball. They stalled near the red zone, so they had their issues there. And you'd think that if they were able to punch it into the end zone on one of those red zone drives that they had to give up for a field goal, the game would have had a different outcome. So the Chiefs need to improve versus the red zone, but the Bengals have a good red zone defense. In key decisions, there really weren't any key decisions at my memory that Reid made during the game. Most of the fourth downs were long, so they weren't really a good opportunity for them to go for it in that case. And as far as player usage, I thought they did a good job. They mixed in a lot of 13 personnel. They threw a lot of tight ends out there. I like that look versus this Bengals defense. And really, I think that if one play had gone differently, the Chiefs would have won this game. And that is that fumble by Travis Kelce. That's how tight these two teams are. The margin is so thin that one turnover while your team is driving down the field can be the difference between a win and a loss. So that's not on Coach Reid. That's on Travis Kelce. Yes, Coach Reid should help tell them, protect the ball, but Travis Kelce's been playing football for a long time, and the defensive player got in there and really fought to get the ball out, and Travis Kelce was trying to hold on, but uh, just destiny had a different plan. This was a loss for the Chiefs in a game they needed to win, so I did ding Reid there. Someone was great, but overall they hung tough versus a really good opponent on the road, and they didn't actually play their best game, and they were still in it. So because of all those things, I give Coach Reid an 82 out of 100 versus the Bengals. Could have done better, but it was a hard fought loss, and you can't win them all, unless you go undefeated, which I think has only happened, twice in the regular season in NFL history. So I'm going to give Reid a bit of a pass here. So that 82 gets him a B minus, and not too bad. Obviously you want to win this game, but it could have been much worse for the Chiefs. And I thought they put a pretty good team out on the field. They did well. They played well. So I netted Reid a nice B minus. But what do you think? You think B minus is too harsh? You think it's just right? You think it's too lenient? You think you should have got a worse grade? Let us know in the comments. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to this video. We've already mentioned that once, but hey, what the heck? 2 times doesn't hurt. So let us know in the comments whether or not think Reid's grade was right. Whether or not what do you think about the Bengals? What's been their kind of key to success versus the Chiefs? And comment anything else you want. I love to see the Chiefs talk. As always, appreciate y'all. Thanks for stopping by and watching. This is Gary, RGR Football, Gridiron Line, signing out. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more, and and subscribe to RGR Football.